Welcome to Dialogue. We are continuing our series on dirty politics, and today we're really getting into one of the most documented, real-world examples of how influence operations have changed. We're opening case 13. This one is, well, it's the foundational text for modern information warfare, the Internet Research Agency. Now, when most people hear foreign influence, they probably picture something out of a Cold War movie.
A spy, maybe, or some very clunky propaganda trying to sell you on one specific idea.
Exactly. They picture one side trying to persuade the other. But the IRA, their mission wasn't persuasion at all. It was something far more terrifying.
It was fragmentation.
Fragmentation. And just manufacturing this overwhelming sense of consensus confusion. That was the goal itself.
That is the single most important thing to get straight before we even look at a single post they made. Persuasion is about changing your mind. The IRA operation, it was built to change the environment around your mind.
They weren't arguing with you.
They were trying to destabilize the very ground that political conversation happens on. Your mind then shifts on its own, just trying to adapt to the chaos. This kind of politics, it doesn't argue, it floods the whole system.
I think of it as a cognitive load test. You're trying to read one thoughtful article, but imagine you've got 10 different videos screaming at you.
And they're all contradictory, all super emotional.
They all look like they're coming from people you'd normally trust. You literally can't process the rational point because your brain is it's maxed out by the sheer volume and hostility.
And that flooding mechanism, that industrialization of friction, is why we need to do this deep dive. Our goal isn't just to say what happened. We need to unpack the blueprint.
Right.
We need to look at what the IRA actually was, how they operated across all these different platforms, and why their cynical content strategy was so effective.
And maybe most importantly, the global implications. Because this new model of influence, it's everywhere now.
To really get the impact, you have to get rid of that image of a lone hacker in a basement. This was not that.
No.
Based on everything we have, public reporting, the platform takedowns, and especially the U.S. indictments from 2018, the Internet Research Agency was a full-on industrial-scale machine.
Located where?
Its headquarters were in St. Petersburg, Russia. And the whole thing got started in the early 2010s. First, it was focused on domestic Russian politics, but then it pivoted hard toward international targets.
So this is less like spies in the shadows and more like a high-volume factory. But instead of cars, they're churning out political outrage.
That's a perfect analogy. We're talking about a state-aligned influence operation. It's a nuanced point, but they align their goals with state interests. They get funding and protection, but the government can still say, they don't have direct day-to-day control.
Plausible deniability.
Always. They had hundreds of paid operators. The budget grew to millions of dollars a year. All of it poured into one thing, manipulating social media on a massive scale.
That structural reality, hundreds of employees, is what feels so new.
Yeah.
You're talking about managers, HR, payroll, performance reviews. It was a 9-to-5 job for hundreds of people whose main task was orchestrating digital chaos in other countries.
And with that professionalism comes specialization. They had departments, a team for graphic design to make the memes, an analytics team to track engagement, and then operational teams managing these huge networks of fake accounts.
They treated online conversation like a factory floor.
They absolutely did.
And I think what gets missed so often is what the mission wasn't. You'd expect a state-aligned group to push one single message, right? Promote this party, attack that policy.
That's the old model. The IRA seemed to understand that a single positive message is actually really hard to scale, and it's easy to debunk.
So they went for something else.
A far more destructive and frankly a more scalable goal. The mandate was to fracture communities, not by giving them a new truth, but by finding every existing crack in society, racial, economic, political, and prying it wide open.
And crucially, to just exhaust the public.
Yes. Exhaustion is the weapon.
That's a heavy concept.
It is. Because if you, the citizen, are so overwhelmed by noise and anger and lies that you just feel tired, you pull back, you disengage.
And that creates a vacuum.
A vacuum that's a huge win for anyone trying to create instability. It's much easier to manage a tired, cynical public than an engaged one.
It's like they weren't trying to add a new fish to the lake. They were just dumping so much mud into it that nothing could see or breathe.
Oh.
Just muddy the water so badly that nobody trusts it anymore, no matter what side they're on.
And that was all done through volume, sheer relentless volume. If you can't beat a good argument with a better one, you just ground it.
So for every one person trying to have a real conversation,
There were 10, 20, sometimes 50 professional fake accounts shouting something inflammatory. That noise makes it cognitively impossible for the real conversation to ever take root.
let's get into that operational blueprint then. How did this machine actually work on a day-to-day basis?
Well, the internal structure really shows you the industrial nature of it. The staff, they weren't just freelancers. They were organized into specific desks or departments.
Like a U.S. desk, European desk, that kind of thing.
Exactly. A U.S. desk, a Ukrainian desk, but also a graphics and meme team, an SEO and blogging team. They even had teams just for managing payments and security for all the fake personas.
So it's basically a highly specialized content marketing agency, but the product they're selling is instability.
That's it, exactly. And they had industrial metrics to match. Operators had these strict daily quotas for content.
This wasn't just casual posting.
Oh, not at all. We're talking quotas like creating 50 unique comments or 10 major Facebook posts or sharing hundreds of memes, all in one 8-hour shift.
And performance was judged on hitting those numbers.
It was judged on hitting the metrics, not on political success, but on volume and engagement.
So how was success even measured if it wasn't about changing votes?
Success was engagement, pure and simple. The metrics were things like raw reach, how many eyeballs saw the post, and the engagement rate. Likes, shares, angry comments. If a post blew up and started a huge fight in the comments, that was a win. The operator was doing a good job.
They were monetizing outrage.
They were. And that leads us to this really crucial and kind of dark point about how they built the personas.
The idea that people trust mirrors more than messengers.
Precisely. We're all wired to be skeptical of obvious propaganda, but we're also tribal. We look for validation from people who sing like us.
They didn't just invent a name.
No, they created an entire fake life story, often backdating posts for years to make it look real. And the variety of these personas was staggering. It was tailored to hit every single fault line in society.
Can you give us a few concrete examples?
Sure. On one end, you had these hyper-local regional political pages, something like Heart of Texas, all about state pride, gun rights, that kind of thing. And it would get tens of thousands of real followers.
And on the other end?
On the complete other end, you'd have these identity-based pages, things like Black Matters US or United Muslims of America. Pages designed specifically to mimic the language and tap into the real grievances of minority communities.
The genius of it is that they didn't have to be authentic. They just had to look like they belonged in your feed.
Exactly. And to build that feeling of authenticity, they used stolen profile pictures, maybe from some random person's social media who didn't have a big online presence.
And then they'd season the account.
For months, sometimes years, posting about the weather or their local sports team winning a game, just mundane life stuff. And that veneer of a normal local person made the political post, when it finally came, feel like it was coming from your neighbor.
Which brings us to what you call the sincere patriot problem. This feels like the dark heart of the whole strategy.
It really illustrates the mechanical advantage they had over real people. Just paint a picture of that persona for us.
Okay, so you've got the account. The profile picture is probably stolen from, I don't know, a dentist's LinkedIn page in Iowa. The name is something like Freedom Fighter 47 with a bunch of flag emojis.
Right.
And this account is professional. It posts 14 hours a day, every single day, relentlessly attacking institutions, fueling skepticism, pushing inflammatory stuff. It seems sincere because of the sheer volume. It looks exactly like a genuinely angry, dedicated citizen.
Now, contrast that person with a real human. The real person has a job, a family. They have maybe 30 minutes at night to look at political news.
That person has finite stamina. They might post one well-thought-out comment, and then they have to go make dinner.
But the IRA operator is on the clock. They are paid to keep up that hostile persona for a full 8-hour shift before handing it off to the next operator who continues it seamlessly.
Real human conversation just can't compete with that stamina. The sincerity is a performance, a veneer over an industrial process. They don't get tired, they don't get bored, they just have to be loud enough for long enough.
And that industrial approach meant they had to customize their tactics for each platform. They knew you couldn't just throw the same content everywhere and expect it to work.
Okay, let's break down that playbook. How did they tailor the chaos for each site?
So on Facebook, the main goal was about building communities and getting people to take action in the real world. Facebook's design, especially with groups, makes people feel like they're in a safe, private space.
which makes them more receptive to the message.
Way more. They created hundreds of these groups, really niche stuff, state secession movements, veterans' rights, specific social justice causes.
And they didn't just post things. They used Facebook's own tools against it, right? Like the event planning tool.
They did. They would host these fake events and sometimes organize actual physical rallies in American cities,
Yeah.
all of it promoted by accounts that looked totally local and legit.
They were even buying ads.
Tens of thousands of dollars in ads to push their most divisive memes and event invitations to the most emotionally volatile demographics. Memes were key on Facebook. They're visual, they hit you fast, and they bypass any kind of rational thought.
So Facebook was for building a fake grassroots army and getting them into the streets.
That's a good way to put it. Now, for Twitter or X, the focus was completely different. It was all about speed and rapid response.
Twitter is built for the political brawl.
And they were masters of it. They specialized in hashtag hijacking. A topic starts trending, and they immediately jump in to inject their narratives from both the left and the right to get maximum visibility.
It maximizes the volatility, a tragedy happens, and before anyone can process it, they're already there, framing the entire conversation.
And they use coordinated pile-ons. If a journalist or a politician posted something they wanted to discredit, a swarm of 50 or 100 of their fake accounts would just descend instantly,
Overwhelming them with abuse and noise.
drowning out the original point entirely. It turns a debate into a situation where one real person is surrounded by a mob of 50.
So Twitter was about speed and anger. What about the visual platforms like Instagram?
Instagram was all about identity. It's built on aesthetics, so the IRA used it to create these really stylized, aspirational images that connect with a target demographic's sense of self. It wasn't about arguing policy.
It was about making you feel seen.
Exactly. They'd use powerful imagery related to a political movement or cultural pride to build an emotional bond. The visuals were so strong, you might not even scrutinize the text that went with it.
So if you saw yourself as a progressive activist, their account would look like the most perfect, cool, stylized version of that identity, a visual bait and switch.
Perfect way to put it. And then finally you have YouTube. Their main tactic there was comment brigades.
Ah, the comment section.
They would swarm the comment sections of news videos and political content. The goal was to make sure that the top, most visible comments were all controlled by their narratives. They'd frame the whole discussion before you even finished watching the video.
Creating this illusion of a popular consensus that was actually completely fake.
It's an incredible level of customization. They weren't just guessing. They were professional marketers of chaos.
This brings us to what might be the most counterintuitive part of the whole operation, the content strategy. It embraced contradiction.
It's brilliant in how cynical it is. Traditional propaganda picks a side. The IRA decided to sell the idea that all sides and the entire political discourse itself are just poisonous.
How did they manage that internally?
The teams were siloed. The team running the far-left personas had no contact with the team running the far-right ones. They operated in total isolation from each other.
Which let them maintain the authenticity of each side.
And it allowed them to do things like simultaneously promote a protest against a new policy and then promote a counter-protest against that same protest.
So you could have an IRA account, let's call it Proud Americans for Freedom, screaming that the media is corrupt. And on the exact same day, another IRA account, say Liberation Now, is screaming that the very same media outlet is corrupt, but for the complete opposite reason.
Right. The goal was never to argue for or against an institution in a coherent way. The goal was to make sure that you, the average citizen, no matter what you believed, saw a constant stream of emotional content that confirmed your deepest fears about everything.
They weren't inventing the grievances out of thin air.
No, that's key. They were amplifying real existing tensions and just steering them toward maximum chaos.
And the scariest part is how they bridged the gap from digital to physical. We know they actually organized real-world events, and people showed up.
Real people showed up to rallies and protests that were fundamentally instigated by these fake accounts. That manufactured digital signal became a real physical event, which then got covered by local news, feeding the outrage loop all over again.
Which leads us to the core lesson of this whole case.
Division scales better than agreement.
Break that down.
Well, think of it like a market. If you try to sell one unified political idea, your audience is automatically limited to the, 20 or 30% of people who might agree with you.
But if your product is conflict,
Your product is conflict, your potential audience is everyone. You draw energy and engagement from every polarized corner of society. You don't need to be popular, you just need to be provocative.
and strategically generating confusion is just superior to pushing one viewpoint that might not even be popular. When everything's a mess, people don't pick a side. They just stop trusting the entire system.
Exactly. And none of it works without the scale, the sheer unrelenting scale of it all. We say volume, but it's hard to really grasp.
We're talking about millions and millions of users reached, tens of thousands of accounts that were eventually taken down, which had generated millions of posts.
And not over a few weeks. This was a continuous operation that ran for years.
So the real innovation wasn't some sophisticated AI or deepfake technology.
Not in the early days, no. It was just brute force. Hundreds of paid employees working in shifts, churning out massive amounts of low-effort, high-emotion content. The strategy was to just drown rational arguments in a sea of manufactured noise until everyone just gave up.
Think about what that does to your own mental environment. You're scrolling your feed, and every third post is angry, it's polarized, but it looks like it's from someone local. You start to believe that hostility is the normal way to interact online.
You adapt your own behavior to the angry environment they created. The sheer cognitive load is the weapon. We don't have the bandwidth to fact-check 100 sources a day, and they knew that. They knew if they just produced enough noise fast enough, eventually you just assume the noise is the reality.
So how did this all come to light? With all that operational security, how are they discovered?
Well, despite all the VPNs and shell companies, the operation did become visible, and I'd argue the exposure itself was the most important outcome of this entire case.
Why exposure over, say, proving it changed an election?
Because the exposure gave us the blueprint, it was a long process. It started with independent researchers and investigative journalists who just started noticing weird, coordinated patterns of activity that didn't look like any real grassroots movement.
And then the platforms themselves got involved.
Right. Twitter, Facebook, Google, they started their own internal reviews, often after a lot of public pressure, and that's what exposed the true scale of it all. That led to the massive takedowns.
But the real turning point was the U.S. indictments in 2018.
That's the moment it became a real named entity. The indictments officially named the Internet Research Agency. They named specific employees, and they laid out the whole funding structure, the daily metrics, the management hierarchy. It was all there.
And even though no one was arrested in Russia, the point of the indictment wasn't really about prosecution, was it?
No, it was information warfare against the information warriors. It was a public data dump of their entire operational manual. It lifted the curtain and forced every country in the world to realize this model exists, it works, and anyone can do it.
Which brings us to the biggest misunderstanding about the IRA. So much of the debate is about, did it swing the election? And that question, it just misses the point entirely.
It completely misses the deeper social damage. The true effect was much more insidious than vote totals. The IRA succeeded in normalizing hostility in our everyday online lives.
It took the political argument you might have once in a while and made it a constant aggressive environment.
It made disagreement feel dangerous, existential even.
So if every conversation you try to have turns into a pile-on, and everyone seems to be acting in bad faith, the natural response is just to withdraw. Why even bother engaging? You start to assume everyone is a troll or a bot.
And that's the real poison. It's manufactured skepticism. It erodes your trust, not just in the media or the government, but in your fellow citizens. If you can't believe that your neighbor's passionate comment is genuine, then the very idea of real consensus just dies.
It seems like we need a new category for this in the history of dirty politics. It's a technological leap from what came before.
Let's connect those dots because it's so important. Think about something like COINTELPRO in the 20th century. That required planting human agents, managing physical risk. It was slow and expensive.
And the scale was limited. You could only deploy so many people.
Exactly. Or think about political think tanks. They try to shape the debate by funding white papers and pushing specific narratives. Also slow, also traceable.
The IRA just skipped all of that.
They industrialized disorientation. They didn't need to infiltrate a movement. They just created a perfect digital mirror of it that they controlled. They didn't need to be subtle. They just overwhelmed everything with volume and contradiction.
They replaced the art of persuasion with the science of systemic exhaustion.
And it's low risk, it's relatively low cost, and it's infinitely scalable.
And the biggest global implication is that once that blueprint was made public, it didn't stay in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
The model spread like a virus because it works.
Oh, it's everywhere now. We see state-aligned influence teams in countries all over the world copying these exact tactics. We've seen reports on troll farms in the Philippines and Venezuela targeting their own domestic opposition.
And it's been commercialized. It's a product you can buy.
Absolutely. The model's been democratized. Private political consultancies now offer digital engagement warfare as a service. You have domestic groups using these same tactics against their political rivals in their own country.
Once the method is proven to work, the nationality of the person using it stops mattering.
It's just a global technique now, a tool for anyone with a budget and a reason to weaponize polarization. That's the ultimate legacy of the IRA. They didn't just break the rules, they wrote the instruction manual for everyone else.
So if we pull all of this together, the scale, the contradictory messages, the targeting, where do we land?
We land at a pretty chilling conclusion. The Internet Research Agency didn't succeed by telling people what to think. It succeeded because it overloaded the entire system. It made the very process of thinking exhausting.
So if every position you see online is extreme, every institution seems corrupt, and every conversation just turns hostile, what's the rational thing to do for a normal, tired person?
Withdrawal. Withdrawal becomes the rational choice. Stepping back, turning it all off, disengaging from civic life. That disengagement is the quiet victory for people who benefit from chaos.
Dirty politics doesn't always have to silence you.
Sometimes the more effective way is just to make speaking feel completely pointless. That feeling of futility, which they work so hard to manufacture, is the thing you should really think about the next time you log on.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, let us know in the comments what really stood out to you in this conversation, and if there's any related topic or new topic that you would like covered in a future video.